Maybe tomorrow. Nicholas Whitmore had it all: wealth, power, and an empty heart. But one night, as he flipped through TV channels, he saw a boy singing, his son, Lucas, the child he abandoned 2 years ago. Now a song could change everything. Is it too late to come back? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The New York skyline glittered against the night as Nicholas Whitmore poured himself another glass of whiskey. His penthouse on the top floor of the Whitmore Tower offered the most spectacular view in the city, but he barely noticed it anymore. At 45, Nicholas had everything money could buy: designer suits, luxury cars, a multi-billion-dollar company, and a black hole where his heart should be. He loosened his tie and sank deeper into his leather couch. The day had been brutal: another corporate takeover, another set of employees to fire, another mountain of money to add to his fortune. He reached for the remote and flipped mindlessly through TV channels, looking for something to numb his mind. Breaking. News from Wall Street, droned a financial reporter. Click, try our new and improved. Click. Tonight on America's Rising Stars. His finger hovered over the button when a small, frail figure caught his eye. The boy couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. He was thin, too thin, with a baseball cap covering what appeared to be a hairless head. But it was the eyes that made Nicholas freeze, huge brown eyes that he knew all too well. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host was saying, "this brave young boy has been through so much, but tonight he's singing a song he wrote for his father." Nicholas's breath caught in his throat. The glass in his hand suddenly felt too heavy. "Please, welcome to the stage, Lucas Morgan." The camera zoomed in on the boy's face. Lucas, his son, 2 years. It had been 2 years since Nicholas had walked away from the hospital room where doctors told them that 5-year-old Lucas had leukemia. 2 years since he'd convinced himself that he couldn't handle watching his son suffer, that he wasn't cut out to be the father of a sick child. 2 years of telling himself that Melissa, Lucas's mother, would handle it better without him. The soft melody began. Lucas's voice, gentle but full of emotion, filled the air. "Dad, do you see me? Did you ever care? I waited by the window, but you were never there." Nicholas's hands began to shake. The whiskey glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. He didn't move to clean it up. His eyes were fixed on the screen, on his son's face. "I don't need your money. I don't need your name. I just wanted you to love me. But you never came." The audience was in tears. The judges wiped their eyes, and Nicholas, he was gasping for air, his chest aching in a way he had never felt before. For 2 years he had convinced himself that Lucas would forget him, that walking away had been the right choice. But now, watching his son, pour his heart out to the world, Nicholas realized the truth. He hadn't abandoned Lucas to spare himself pain. He had abandoned him because he was a coward. "And that was Lucas Morgan, ladies and gentlemen," the host said, her voice thick with emotion. "We'll be right back after these messages." Nicholas grabbed his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 years. "James," he barked when his assistant answered, "find out everything you can about America's Rising Stars, where they film, who Lucas Morgan's agent is, everything." "Mr. Whitmore, it's 11 at night. Now, James, I don't care what it takes." Nicholas hung up and stared at the TV screen, which had switched to commercials. His hands were still trembling. He pulled up his contacts and scrolled until he found Melissa's number. His thumb hovered over it for a long moment before he put the phone down. What could he possibly say to her? To Lucas, "Sorry I abandoned you when you were fighting for your life." An hour later, James called back. "The show films in Los Angeles. Mr. Whitmore. Lucas Morgan is represented by his mother, Melissa Morgan. They live in a small apartment in Brooklyn. Just across the bridge. All this time, his son had been minutes away. What about his condition?" There was a pause. "According to press materials for the show, Lucas has been in remission for 6 months, sir." Remission. Lucas had beaten cancer, and Nicholas hadn't been there to see it. "Book me on the show, James. As a special guest, a surprise judge, whatever. Use my money, use my influence, I don't care. Just get me on that stage." "Sir, that's not how these shows work." "Make it happen, James, by tomorrow." The next morning, Nicholas paced his office, unable to focus on the stack of contracts on his desk. His eyes kept drifting to the photo frame he'd buried in his drawer 2 years ago. A 5-year-old Lucas sitting on his shoulders at the zoo, both of them laughing. His phone rang. It was James. "It's done, sir." The producers were reluctant, but when you offered to make a donation to the children's cancer ward that Lucas was treated at, well, they agreed. You're scheduled to appear on next week's show as a surprise guest judge. Good. That's good. Nicholas hung up and picked up the photo frame. His eyes welled with tears as he traced Lucas's smiling face with his finger. "I'm sorry, buddy," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Across town, in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, Morgan was hanging up the phone, her face pale with shock. "Mom, who was that?" Lucas asked, looking up from his breakfast cereal. Melissa forced a smile. "Just someone from the show, honey. Eat your breakfast. We need to get you to school." Lucas nodded and went back to his cereal. He looked better than he had in months. His hair was starting to grow back, soft, fine wisps that made him look even younger than his 7 years. The dark circles under his eyes had faded, and he had gained back some of the weight he'd lost during treatment. Once Lucas was on the school bus, Melissa sank onto the couch, her hands shaking as she dialed a number. "Kate? It's Melissa. I need to talk. It's about Nicholas. He's coming back." An hour later, Kate Peterson, Melissa's best friend since college, arrived at her apartment with coffee and concerned eyes. "What happened?" Kate asked, handing Melissa a cup. "America's Rising Stars called. Nicholas somehow managed to get himself on the show as a guest judge for next week's episode." Kate's eyes widened. "After 2 years of nothing? Not even child support?" "He sent money," Melissa said, staring into her coffee. "Every month like clockwork, more than the court would have ordered. But never a note, never a call." "What are you going to do?" Melissa ran a hand through her hair. "What can I do? Lucas is going to see him. After everything Nicholas put him through, after all the nights Lucas cried himself to sleep, asking for his daddy, you could pull Lucas from the show and break his heart again. This is his dream, Kate. He's been through so much, and singing is the one thing that makes him truly happy. I can't take that away from him." Kate reached over and squeezed Melissa's hand. "Do you think Nicholas saw Lucas on TV last night?" "He must have. That's the only explanation. 2 years of nothing, and suddenly he wants to be on the show. He must have seen Lucas's song. The song about him," Kate said. "About how he abandoned his son when he needed him most." Melissa nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Lucas worked so hard on that song. He said it helped him express his feelings. I didn't have the heart to tell him not to perform it, and now Nicholas heard it." "Yes." They sat in silence for a moment. "What if—" Kate started. "What if Nicholas is genuinely sorry? What if he wants to make amends?" Melissa laughed bitterly. "Nicholas Whitmore doesn't do sorry. He does damage control. This is probably just about his image. He can't have the whole country knowing he abandoned his cancer-stricken son." "Maybe," Kate said gently. "But what if it's not? What if Lucas finally gets what he's wanted for 2 years, his father back? And what happens when Nicholas walks away again? When things get tough, or when Lucas has another health scare? I can't let Lucas go through that pain again." Kate nodded. "I understand, but Lucas is going to see him on that stage. You need to prepare him." Melissa wiped away a tear. "How do I prepare a 7-year-old for seeing the father who abandoned him?" That afternoon, when Lucas came home from school, Melissa sat him down on the couch. "Honey, I need to talk to you about next week's show." Lucas's eyes lit up. "Did I make it to the finals? Did they tell you?" Melissa smiled. "No, they haven't announced the finalists yet, but there's going to be a special guest judge next week." "Is it someone famous like Taylor Swift?" Melissa took a deep breath. "It's your father, Lucas. It's Dad." Lucas went completely still. His eyes, so much like Nicholas's, widened in shock. "Dad, my dad is going to be there." Melissa nodded. "Yes, honey. Did he see me on TV? Did he hear my song?" "I think he must have." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a small voice, "Does he want to see me?" The question broke Melissa's heart. "I don't know, baby. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, You are the bravest, strongest person I know. And I'm so proud of you." Lucas threw his arms around her. "Do you think he'll like me, Mum?" Melissa held him tight, fighting back tears. "He'd be crazy not to, Lucas. He'd be absolutely crazy not to." The week passed in a blur for Nicholas. He spent his days in meetings, his evenings researching everything he could about Lucas's battle with leukemia. The treatments, the side effects, the statistics, all the things he should have learned 2 years ago when the diagnosis first came. The night before the show, he sat in his penthouse with a stack of paper in front of him. He'd been trying to write a speech, an explanation, an apology, but every attempt felt hollow. His phone rang. It was James. "Everything's set for tomorrow, Mr. Whitmore. Your car will pick you up at 9 a.m. The show starts filming at noon." "Thank you, James." Nicholas hung up and looked back at the blank page in front of him. What could he possibly say to make things right? The truth was, there were no words that could erase 2 years of absence. He picked up the picture of Lucas. Again. "I'm coming, buddy," he whispered. "For what it's worth, I'm coming." At the studio the next day, Nicholas was escorted to a private dressing room. The producers had briefed him on the format of the show, on when he would be introduced. He would be a surprise guest judge, brought out after the first round of performances. What they hadn't told him was whether Lucas knew he was coming. As he waited, he could hear the audience filing in, the excited murmur of voices. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He'd faced down boardrooms full of hostile executives without breaking a sweat, but the thought of seeing his son again had him on the verge of panic. A production assistant with a headset knocked on his door. "5 minutes, Mr. Whitmore." Nicholas nodded. He straightened his tie, checked his reflection one last time. He looked polished, successful, exactly the image he'd cultivated for years. But his eyes betrayed him. They were the eyes of a terrified man. The production assistant returned. "It's time, Mr. Whitmore. Please follow me." Nicholas took a deep breath and followed her through a maze of corridors. He could hear the host's voice booming over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special surprise for you tonight." And then he was walking onto the stage, blinded by bright lights, deafened by applause. The host was saying his name, talking about his business success, his philanthropy, all things that seemed meaningless now. Nicholas took his seat at the judges' table, smiling automatically at the cameras. His eyes scanned the wings of the stage, looking for Lucas, and then he saw him. Lucas was standing in the shadows, his mother beside him, both of them staring at Nicholas with identical expressions of shock, despite the producer's assurances that they had been told. Lucas looked so small, so fragile. The stage lights highlighted his thinness, the cap covering his still-growing hair. But he was standing tall, his chin up, a fighter. Nicholas's heart squeezed painfully in his chest. He had done this. He had left this brave little boy to fight alone. The host was talking, again introducing the first contestant, but Nicholas couldn't focus on anything but Lucas, who was now being ushered backstage to prepare for his performance. The first 3 contestants passed in a blur. Nicholas gave feedback on autopilot, his mind entirely elsewhere. And then, the bass. Host was speaking again. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next contestant touched all our hearts last week with his original song. Please welcome back to the stage, Lucas Morgan." The audience erupted in applause, and Lucas walked out, his small frame dwarfed by the massive stage. He approached the microphone, his eyes finding Nicholas immediately. For a moment they just looked at each other, father and son, separated by 2 years and 20 feet of stage. Then Lucas spoke, his voice clear despite his obvious nerves. "I'm going to sing a different song tonight, one I wrote this week. It's called Maybe Tomorrow." The music started, a simple, hopeful melody, and Lucas began to sing. "Maybe tomorrow you'll be there. Maybe tomorrow you'll care. Maybe tomorrow we'll start again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe then." Nicholas couldn't breathe. The song was still about him, about Lucas's hope that his father might return. But unlike the first song, which had been full of pain and abandonment, this one was tentatively hopeful. When Lucas finished, There wasn't a dry eye in the house. The audience was on its feet, applauding wildly. The other judges were dabbing at their eyes. And Nicholas? He was frozen, staring at his son, realizing with crystal clarity what had been missing from his life for the past 2 years. The host turned to him. "Mr. Whitmore, would you like to give our young contestant some feedback?" Nicholas stood up, his legs unsteady. He walked across the stage until he was standing in front of Lucas. Up close, he could see every detail of his son's face, the hope, the fear, the wariness. "Lucas," he said, his voice cracking. But there were no words. Not now, maybe not ever. So instead, Nicholas did the one thing he should have done 2 years ago. He knelt down and opened his arms. For a moment that felt like eternity. Lucas just stared at him. Then, with a sob that tore through the silent studio, he flung himself into his father's arms. "I'm sorry," Nicholas whispered, holding his son close, feeling the small, rapid beat of his heart. "I'm so sorry." Lucas clung to him, his thin arms surprisingly strong. "You came back," he said, his voice muffled against Nicholas's shoulder. "You really came back?" "Yes," Nicholas said, tears streaming down his face. "And I'm never leaving again, I promise." But as he held his son, Nicholas caught sight of Melissa standing in the wings. Her face was a storm of emotions, relief for Lucas, wariness, anger. And he knew that a simple promise wasn't going to be enough, not for her, not after what he had done. The road ahead would be long and difficult. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. But for the first time in 2 years, Nicholas felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. As he held Lucas, as the audience cheered and cried, as the cameras captured it all, Nicholas made a silent vow. He would be the father Lucas deserved. He would make up for the time he'd lost. He would earn back Melissa's trust, no matter what it took. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every tear that fell between father and son. The audience was on their feet, many of them crying along with Nicholas and Lucas. It was the kind of moment television producers dreamed about, raw, real emotion that couldn't be scripted. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host said, her own voice thick with emotion, "I think we all just witnessed something truly special." Nicholas barely heard her. His world had narrowed to the small boy in his arms, to the fragile heartbeat he could feel against his chest. After what seemed like both an eternity and not nearly long enough, he gently pulled back to look at Lucas's face. "You were amazing up there," Nicholas said, wiping a tear from his son's cheek. "Your voice, it's incredible." Lucas smiled shyly. "Mom says I get it from Grandma Rose." "She's right." Nicholas smiled, remembering his mother's beautiful voice. She had passed away when Lucas was just 3. "Grandma Rose would be so proud of you." The host approached them, microphone in hand. "Lucas, this is quite a surprise, isn't it? Did you know your father was going to be here today?" Lucas glanced at Nicholas, then at the camera. "No, I didn't." "No, but I hoped he heard my song." The host turned to Nicholas. "And Mr. Whitmore, what made you decide to come on the show today?" Nicholas hesitated, aware of the millions of viewers watching, of the cameras capturing his every expression. But more importantly, aware of his son's eyes fixed on him, waiting for his answer. "I heard Lucas singing last week," he said finally. "His song, it made me realize how badly I'd failed him, how much I'd missed. I had to come here. I had to tell him how sorry I am." The host nodded, sympathetically. "And what happens now?" It was a simple question, but one Nicholas hadn't fully considered in his rush to get to Lucas. He looked toward the wings of the stage, where Melissa stood, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. Her expression was unreadable. "Now," Nicholas said, looking back at Lucas, "I try to make up for lost time, if Lucas and his mother will let me." The audience applauded again, but Nicholas could see the skepticism in some faces. It was the same skepticism he saw in Melissa's eyes. Words were easy, promises were easy. It was actions that would count. The host seemed to sense the tension. "Well, we still have a competition to finish, don't we? Lucas, you should head backstage while we hear from our other contestants. Mr. Whitmore, if you'll return to the judges' table." Lucas hugged Nicholas one more time before letting go. "Will you wait for me after the show?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. "Of course I will," Nicholas promised. I'll be right here." As Lucas walked off stage, Nicholas returned to his seat, feeling both lighter and heavier than before. He had found his son again, but the weight of his past mistakes pressed down on him. How could he possibly make up for 2 years of absence? The rest of the show proceeded, but Nicholas was only half present. He gave feedback to the contestants, smiled for the cameras, played his part. But his mind was with Lucas and with Melissa, whose silent presence in the wings felt like a constant reminder of his failures. Finally, it was time to announce the finalists who would move on to next week's round. The host read the names one by one, building tension with each pause. When she announced Lucas as the final contestant moving forward, Nicholas felt a surge of pride so strong it almost brought him to tears again. As the show ended and the audience began to file out, Nicholas made his way backstage, scanning the crowded area for Lucas. He found him with Melissa, who was helping him put on his jacket. "Lucas," Nicholas called, making his way through the crowd. Lucas's face lit up. "Dad, I made it to the finals." "I know, buddy. I'm so proud of you." Nicholas reached them, suddenly aware of the awkwardness of the situation. He hadn't spoken to Melissa in 2 years, since that terrible day at the hospital when he'd walked out. "Melissa," he said, his voice solemn, "it's good to see you." Melissa's expression was guarded. "Nicholas, this is quite a surprise. Can we talk, please?" Melissa glanced down at Lucas, who was looking between them with anxious eyes. "Lucas, honey, why don't you go say goodbye to Ms. Jenny? She wanted to congratulate you on making the finals." Lucas nodded and reluctantly moved away, looking back at Nicholas as if afraid he might disappear again. "I'll be right here," Nicholas reassured him. "I promise." Once Lucas was out of earshot, Melissa's cordial mask slipped. "What are you doing here, Nicholas?" she asked, her voice low and intense. "After 2 years of nothing, you just show up on national television to play the devoted father?" Nicholas flinched at the anger in her voice, but he couldn't deny she had every right to it. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he said. "I know what I did was unforgivable, but when I saw him singing that song, when I heard what he was feeling, Melissa, I have to try to make this right. Make it right," Melissa repeated incredulously. "Do you have any idea what Lucas has been through? The chemotherapy, the bone marrow transplant, the infections, the nights in the hospital when he was in so much pain he couldn't stop crying. Where were you then, Nicholas?" Each word was like a knife to his heart, but he forced himself to stand there and take it. He deserved all of it and more. "I was a coward," he admitted. "I was scared and selfish, and I convinced myself that Lucas was better off without me, that you were better off without me. I was wrong, so wrong, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." Melissa studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. "What happens when he gets sick again? Because it could happen, Nicholas. Remission isn't a guarantee. The cancer could come back. Will you run away again when things get tough?" "No," Nicholas said firmly. "Never again. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I'm asking for a chance to prove it, to be there for Lucas the way I should have been all along." Melissa sighed, the anger in her eyes giving way to a bone-deep weariness. "It's not that simple, Nicholas. Lucas has been through enough trauma. I won't let him be hurt again." "I understand," Nicholas said, "but please let me see him. Let me be part of his life, even in a small way. I'll do whatever you think is best." Before Melissa could respond, Lucas came running back. "Mom, Dad, Mr. Roberts, the producer, says I need to start practicing right away for next week's show. He says I need a new song that will top tonight's performance." Nicholas and Melissa exchanged a look over Lucas's head. There was so much more they needed to discuss, but not here. Not now. "That sounds exciting, honey," Melissa said, forcing a smile. "But it's getting late and you have school tomorrow." Lucas's face fell. "But Dad just got here. Can't we all go get ice cream or something?" The hope in his voice was almost painful to hear. Nicholas looked to Melissa, letting her make the call. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Okay, ice cream, but just for a little while and then we're going home." Lucas cheered and grabbed both their hands, pulling them toward the exit. The simple act of his son's small hand in his own nearly undid Nicholas again. Such a small thing, holding your child's hand. something he had taken for granted before, and now it felt like the most precious gift in the world. They found a small ice cream parlor a few blocks from the studio, a cozy place with checkered tablecloths and a jukebox in the corner. Lucas ordered a banana split, his eyes wide at the mountain of ice cream and toppings. "Are you sure you can eat all that, buddy?" Nicholas asked, smiling. Lucas nodded seriously. "I've been practicing eating a lot. Mom says I need to gain back all the weight I lost when I was sick." Nicholas's smile faltered, another reminder of all he had missed, all the battles his son had fought without him. "Well, you're doing great," he said. "You look stronger every minute." Lucas beamed at the praise and dug into his ice cream with enthusiasm. As he ate, he chattered away about school, about his friends, about his music lessons. Nicholas hung on every word, trying to piece together the life of the little boy he had abandoned. "And Ms. Peterson, Mom's friend, she lets me play with her. Dog Max whenever we visit. He's a golden retriever and he's really smart. He can fetch and roll over and everything." "That sounds wonderful," Nicholas said. "I had a dog when I was your age. His name was Buddy." "Really? Was he smart like Max?" "Not really," Nicholas laughed. "He was always getting into trouble. But he was loyal and kind, and that's what matters most." The conversation flowed easily, Lucas acting as a buffer between his parents. Melissa remained mostly silent, watching the interaction with guarded eyes. But Nicholas caught her smiling a few times at Lucas's excitement, and it gave him hope. All too soon, Melissa checked her watch. "Lucas, it's getting late. We need to head home." Lucas's face fell. "But we just started talking. Can't Dad come home with us?" Melissa and Nicholas exchanged another look. "Not tonight, buddy," Nicholas said gently. "But maybe soon if your mom says it's okay. Your father has to get back to his own place," Melissa added, "and you need your rest if you're going to be ready for school tomorrow." Lucas looked between them, disappointment written all over his face. "Promise you'll come see me again?" he asked Nicholas. "Promise you won't go away for a long time again?" "I promise," Nicholas said solemnly. "In fact, I'd like to see you tomorrow if that's okay with your mom." They both looked at Melissa, who hesitated before nodding. "You can come by the apartment around 4. Lucas gets home from school at 3:30. "Thank you," Nicholas said, the relief evident in his voice. "I'll be there." They walked out to the street together, where Melissa hailed a taxi. Before getting in, Lucas threw his arms around Nicholas one more time. "I'm really glad you came back, Dad," he whispered. Nicholas hugged him tight. "Me too. Buddy, me too." As the taxi pulled away, Melissa gave Nicholas one last look through the window. A warning, a plea, he wasn't sure which. But the message was clear. Don't hurt him again. The next day, Nicholas was a bundle of nerves. He'd cancelled all his meetings, much to the shock of his executive team. Nicholas Whitmore never cancelled meetings, not even when he had pneumonia last year and his doctor had ordered bed rest. "Are you sure you're feeling all right, sir?" James had asked when Nicholas called to clear his schedule. "I've never been better," Nicholas replied. "I'm spending the day with my son." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your son, sir?" Nicholas realized with a pang that he had never mentioned Lucas to James in the 2 years they'd worked together. "Yes, James, my son, Lucas. He's 7 years old and the bravest person I've ever met." I see, sir. Shall I reschedule the Wilson meeting for next week?" "Make it the week after. I'm going to need some time." After hanging up, Nicholas spent the morning in a frenzy of activity. He went shopping, filling bags with toys, books, art supplies, anything he thought a 7-year-old boy might like. He didn't know Lucas's current interests, his favorite colors, his favorite foods. So many details about his own son that he should have known. At 3:45, Nicholas stood outside Melissa and Lucas's apartment building in Brooklyn, laden with shopping bags. The building was modest, well-maintained but obviously not luxurious. It was a far cry from the penthouse he lived in or the mansion he and Melissa had shared when they were married. He took a deep breath and buzzed their apartment. "Hello?" Melissa's voice came through the intercom. "It's Nicholas, I'm a bit early." There was a pause, then a buzz as the door unlocked. Nicholas made his way up to the 3rd floor, his heart pounding harder with each step. Melissa opened the door, her expression neutral. "Come in. Lucas is just finishing his homework." Nicholas stepped inside, taking in the small but cozy apartment. There were photos everywhere. Lucas as a baby, Lucas on his first day of kindergarten, Lucas in a hospital bed with a brave smile. A timeline of the life he had missed. "Dad!" Lucas came running from what must be his bedroom, nearly tackling Nicholas with the force of his hug. "You came!" "Of course I did, buddy. I promised, didn't I?" Lucas pulled back, noticing the bags. "What's all that?" Nicholas suddenly felt foolish. "Just some things I thought you might like, but I realized I don't know what you're into these days." Lucas peered into one of the bags. "Wow, is that a remote control car? And a dinosaur model kit? And look at all these books." His enthusiasm eased Nicholas's worries somewhat. He glanced at Melissa, who was watching the scene with a complex mix of emotions. "It's too much, Nicholas," she said quietly. "You can't buy his love." "I know," Nicholas replied, equally quiet. "That's not what I'm trying to do. I want to get to know him again, to find out who he is now." Melissa's expression softened. "Slightly. Well, you're in luck. He hasn't stopped talking about you since last night. Why don't you two set up the car in the living room while I finish making dinner?" "Can Dad stay for dinner?" Lucas asked immediately. Melissa hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, he can stay for dinner." Lucas cheered and dragged Nicholas to the living room, where they spent the next hour setting up the remote control car and racing it around the furniture. Nicholas was surprised at how quickly Lucas mastered the controls and how much joy he took in the simple toy. "You're really good at this, buddy," Nicholas said, as Lucas navigated the car through a makeshift obstacle course of cushions. "I play a lot of video games," Lucas explained. "Mom got me a PlayStation when I was in the hospital. She said it would help me stay busy during treatments." Nicholas's chest tightened, another reminder of what he had missed. "What kind of games do you like?" "Racing games are my favorite, and adventure games, but Mom only lets me play for an hour a day. She says too much screen time isn't good for my brain." Nicholas smiled. "Your mom's a smart lady." "The smartest," Lucas agreed seriously. "She knew all the doctor words when I was sick. Even Dr. Chen was impressed." Nicholas nodded, imagining Melissa learning medical terminology, advocating for their son, all while dealing with the emotional toll of Lucas's illness, and doing it alone. Dinner was a simple meal of spaghetti and meatballs, Lucas's favorite. The conversation was mostly carried by Lucas, who seemed determined to fill Nicholas in on every detail of his life. And then Ms. Rodriguez, my music teacher, she said, "I have perfect pitch. Do you know what that means, Dad?" "It means I can hear a note and tell what it is without looking at the piano." "That's incredible, Lucas," Nicholas said, genuinely impressed. "Your voice last night was amazing. Have you always loved singing?" Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "Mom says I was singing before I could talk, but I really started writing my own songs when I was in the hospital. It helped me not be scared." Nicholas swallowed hard, the familiar guilt washing over him. "Your songs are beautiful. The one you sang last night. Maybe tomorrow." It was really special. Lucas looked down at his plate. "I wrote it after Mum told me you were coming to the show. I was going to sing the sad song again, but then I thought maybe things could be different now." The simple hope in his son's voice was almost more than Nicholas could bear. He reached across the table and took Lucas's small hand in his. "Things will be different, Lucas. I promise you that." After dinner, Nicholas helped Lucas with his bath and then read him a bedtime story from one of the new books he'd brought. It was a simple tale about a father and son who went fishing and got caught in a storm, but found their way home by following the stars. "Dad?" Lucas asked as Nicholas closed the book. "Are you going to live with us now?" The question took Nicholas by surprise. "No, buddy, I have my own place, but I'll be coming to see you a lot if that's okay with you." "Every day," Nicholas smiled. "I'll try my best, but I do have to work sometimes." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Mom says you're really important at your job, that you run a big company." "The company is important," Nicholas admitted, "but not as important as you. I've just been too stupid to realize that until now." Lucas giggled. "Mom says we shouldn't say stupid." "Your mom is right again." Nicholas smiled. "Let's say I've been unwise." Lucas yawned, his eyelids growing heavy. "I'm glad you're not being unwise anymore, Dad." "Me too, buddy. Me too." Nicholas sat with Lucas until he fell asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. How many nights had he missed this? How many bedtime stories and prayers and goodnight kisses? When he was sure Lucas was fully asleep, Nicholas quietly left the room, closing the door most of the way. He found Melissa in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes. "Let me help," he offered, picking up a dish towel. They worked in silence for a few minutes, falling into an old rhythm they had once shared in their married days. "Thank you," Nicholas said finally, "for letting me see him, for letting me be here tonight." Melissa kept her eyes on the dish she was scrubbing. "I'm doing it for Lucas, not for you. I know, and I'm grateful, more than I can say." Melissa finally looked at him. "He's so happy you're back, Nicholas. I haven't seen him this excited since before he got sick. He's an amazing kid. You've done an incredible job with him." "I had to," Melissa said simply. "I was all he had." The words stung, but Nicholas couldn't deny their truth. "Melissa, I know I can never make up for what I did, for leaving you both when things got tough. But I want to try. I want to be the father Lucas deserves." Melissa put down the dish she was washing and turned to face him fully. "I need to know that you're in this for the long haul, Nicholas. Not just while it's new and exciting. Not just while he's in remission and things are relatively easy. I need to know that if, God forbid, he gets sick again, you won't run away." "I won't," Nicholas said firmly. "I've learned my lesson in the hardest possible way. Nothing could ever make me leave him again." Melissa studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or uncertainty. "I want to believe you. For Lucas's sake, I really do. But you're going to have to prove it with actions, not just words." "I understand. And I will, day by day." Melissa nodded. "You can come see him tomorrow after school again, and maybe on the weekend you could take him to the park or something. Just the two of you." Nicholas felt a surge of hope. "I'd like that very much." As he helped finish the dishes, Nicholas couldn't help but glance at the photos on the refrigerator. Lucas in a hospital gown, his head bald from chemotherapy but still smiling bravely. Melissa beside him, dark circles under her eyes but determination in her face. The family he had abandoned, fighting the battle of their lives without him. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." Melissa followed his gaze to the photos. "It was the hardest thing I've ever been through," she admitted. "There were days I didn't think either of us would make it. Days when the pain was so bad he couldn't stop screaming. Days when the doctors weren't sure if the treatment was working. I needed you, Nicholas. We both did." Nicholas bowed his head, accepting the pain of her words. "I know. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you both. Just don't hurt him again," Melissa said, her voice thick with emotion. "That's all I ask. Don't give him hope and then take it away." "I won't," Nicholas promised. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'm going to earn back his trust. And yours, if you'll let me." As Nicholas left the apartment that night, he felt both lighter and heavier than he had in years. The weight of his guilt remained, but alongside it was something new, a sense of purpose, of clarity. For the first time in 2 years, he knew exactly what mattered. And it wasn't his company or his money or his power. It was a small boy with brave eyes and a voice that could break your heart. It was his son, his family. The things he should have valued all along. As he walked to his car, Nicholas pulled out his phone and made a call. "James, it's me. I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the week and start looking into children's cancer research foundations. I want to make a major donation, but I need to find the right one." "Yes, sir. May I ask what's prompted this sudden interest?" Nicholas looked back at the apartment building, at the window where he knew Lucas was sleeping peacefully. "Let's just say I've finally figured out what's really important," he said. "And I've got a lot of lost time to make up for." The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Nicholas. For the first time in years, his business empire wasn't his primary focus. Instead, his days revolved around school pickups, homework help, and learning all he could about his son's interests. Lucas was thriving with the attention. His confidence grew, his smile appeared more often, and his performances on America's Rising Stars continued to impress both the judges and the audience. He had made it all the way to the final round, which was scheduled to air live in just 3 days. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Nicholas took Lucas to Central Park. They had fallen into a comfortable routine of weekend outings, just the two of them, bonding and rebuilding the relationship that Nicholas had thrown away. "Dad, watch this," Lucas called, sailing a paper airplane across the grassy clearing where they had spread a picnic blanket. Nicholas watched with pride as the plane soared through the air in a perfect arc. "That's amazing, buddy. Where did you learn to make planes like that?" "Uncle Peter taught me," Lucas said, retrieving the plane. "He comes over a lot. He helped Mom when I was sick." Nicholas felt a twinge of something, jealousy, at the mention, say of Melissa's brother. Peter had never liked Nicholas much, and the feeling had been mutual, but he pushed the feeling aside. Peter had been there for Lucas when Nicholas hadn't. He should be grateful, not resentful. "That was good of him," Nicholas said. "I'll have to thank him sometime." Lucas nodded and sat down on the blanket, reaching for a sandwich from the picnic basket. "Uncle Peter says you're just going to leave again," he said casually, as if commenting on the weather. "He says you'll get bored of playing Dad." Nicholas nearly choked on his drink. "He said that to you?" Lucas shrugged. "I heard him telling Mum he didn't know I was listening." Nicholas took a deep breath, fighting down his anger. "Lucas, look at me." The boy looked up, his eyes, so much like Nicholas's own, filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "I am never, ever leaving you again," Nicholas said firmly. "What I did before was wrong. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and I will regret it forever. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere, no matter what anyone says." Lucas studied his face. "Promise?" "I promise." Nicholas held out his pinky. "Pinky swear." Lucas's face broke into a grin as he linked his small finger with his father's. "Pinky swears are forever. Mom says you can never break them." "Your mom is right." Again, they continued their picnic, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. Lucas's upcoming performance for the finals, his school science project, the piano lessons Nicholas had arranged for him. "Dad?" Lucas asked as they were packing up. "Are you and Mom going to get married again?" The question caught Nicholas off guard. I don't know, buddy. Your mom and I, we have a lot of history. It's complicated. But you still love her, right? I see how you look at her. It's like how Prince Charming looks at Cinderella in my storybook." Nicholas smiled at the comparison. "Your mom is an incredible woman, and yes, I still care about her very much. But sometimes, caring about someone isn't enough. Trust is important, too, and I broke your mom's trust when I left." Lucas thought about this. "But you're trying to fix it, right?" "Every day," Nicholas assured him. "Every single day." As they walked back through the park, Lucas's hand in his, Nicholas couldn't help but reflect on the boy's question. Did he still love Melissa? The answer was more complicated than he could explain to a 7-year-old. There had always been love, even in the darkest moments. But there had also been selfishness, immaturity, and ultimately betrayal. When they arrived back at the apartment, Lucas ran ahead, eager to tell Melissa about their day. Nicholas followed more slowly, his mind still turning over Lucas's question. He found Melissa and Lucas in the living room, Lucas animatedly describing the epic paper airplane competition they'd had. "And then Dad's plane did a loop-de-loop and crashed into a bush," Lucas was saying, gesturing wildly. "It was so funny." Melissa laughed, a sound that still made Nicholas's heart skip a beat. "Sounds like you two had a great time." "The best," Lucas confirmed. "Can Dad stay for dinner again, please?" Melissa hesitated, glancing at Nicholas. These past few weeks they had established a careful routine. Nicholas came over several evenings a week to spend time with Lucas, sometimes staying for dinner. But there was always a clear boundary. He was there for Lucas, not to rekindle things with Melissa. "Actually," Nicholas said, "I was hoping to talk to your mom about something important. Maybe we could all go out for dinner." Melissa looked surprised, but Lucas jumped at the idea. "Can we go to that place with the big burgers? The one where they have the arcade games?" "If that's okay with your mom," Nicholas said. Melissa nodded slowly. "I guess that would be fine. Let me just get my purse." When she left the room, Lucas tugged on Nicholas's sleeve. "Is this a date, Dad? Are you going to ask Mom to marry you again?" Nicholas chuckled. No, buddy, it's not a date. I just need to talk to your mom about something important, about your future. Lucas's eyes widened. My future? Am I in trouble? No, not at all. It's something good, I promise. Before Lucas could ask more questions, Melissa returned and they headed out to the family restaurant Lucas had requested. It was loud and crowded, filled with families and children's laughter. Not exactly the setting Nicholas would have chosen for a serious conversation, but at least Lucas would be entertained by the arcade games. After they ordered, Nicholas gave Lucas a handful of quarters for the games. Why don't you try to win me that big stuffed tiger? He suggested, pointing to a prize on display. I'll save it for my office. Lucas grinned and ran off, leaving Nicholas and Melissa alone at the table. So, Melissa said, stirring her iced tea, what's this important thing you wanted to discuss? Nicholas took a deep breath. I've been thinking a lot about Lucas's future, about providing for him properly. Melissa's expression hardened slightly. We've been doing just fine without your money, Nicholas. I know, and that's not what I meant. It's just, I want to set up a trust fund for Lucas, for his education, for any medical expenses that might come up, for his future. We have health insurance, and I've been saving for his college since he was born. I know you have. You're an amazing mother, Melissa. But I want to do this. I need to do this, not just for Lucas, but for my own peace of mind. Melissa studied him for a moment. What exactly are you proposing? A trust that would be managed by both of us. You would have full access to it for anything Lucas needs, medical care, education, extracurricular activities, whatever. I'm thinking $5 million to start, with additions over time. Melissa nearly choked on her drink. $5 million, Nicholas, that's insane. It's not. It's a fraction of what I have, and it's the least I can do. I've missed 2 years of his life, Melissa. 2 years where I should have been contributing, helping, supporting both of you. Let me do this, please. Melissa was quiet for a long moment, watching Lucas at the arcade games. And what happens if you disappear again? What happens to this trust fund then? It's irrevocable, Nicholas said. Once the money is there, it can't be taken back. And if something were to happen to me, or if I were to fail you both again, the trust would continue under your sole management. Melissa turned back to him. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I have. I want to do right by Lucas, by both of you. Nicholas. Melissa began, then paused as their food arrived. They ate in silence for a few minutes before she spoke again. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I do. But money isn't what Lucas needs from you. It's not what either of us needs. I know. That, Nicholas said earnestly, and I'm trying to be there in all the ways that matter, but this is something I can do, something concrete. Please, let me do it. Melissa sighed. I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now. Nicholas nodded. That's fair, thank you. Lucas returned to the table, proudly holding a small stuffed dolphin. I didn't get the tiger, he said, slightly disappointed, but I got this. For you, Mum. Melissa's face softened as she took the small toy. It's perfect, honey, thank you. As they ate their meal, Lucas chattered about his upcoming performance for the finals of America's Rising Stars. I've written a brand new song, he said excitedly. It's a surprise. I'm not telling anyone what it's about yet. Not even your old dad? Nicholas teased. Lucas shook his head solemnly. Nope, it's a surprise for everyone, but I think you'll both like it. After dinner, they walked back to the apartment together, Lucas between them, holding both their hands. It was a picture-perfect family scene, one that made Nicholas's heart ache with both joy and regret. This was what he had thrown away. This was what he was fighting to rebuild. At the apartment, Lucas hugged Nicholas tightly before heading to his room to practice his song. Nicholas turned to Melissa at the door. Thank you for tonight, he said, and for thinking about what I said. Melissa nodded. I'll let you know, but Nicholas, there's something you should know. What is it? Melissa glanced toward Lucas's room, lowering her voice. Peter's been helping me with a lawsuit against Dr. Friedman, the first oncologist who treated Lucas. He missed warning signs, delayed tests. By the time we got a proper diagnosis, the cancer was much more advanced than it should have been. Nicholas felt a flash of anger. Why didn't you tell me? When should I have told you, Nicholas? When you walked out on us? When you were nowhere to be found for 2 years. The barb hit its mark. Nicholas stepped back, acknowledging her point. I'm sorry, you're right, but I'm here now, and I want to help. I know people, good lawyers who specialize in medical malpractice. Peter is a good lawyer, Melissa said defensively. I know he is, but this is our son we're talking about. I want the best of the best on this. Melissa hesitated, then nodded. I'll talk to Peter about it. See what he thinks. That's all I ask. As Nicholas turned to leave, Melissa called after him. Nicholas, about the trust fund. I'll agree to it on one condition. He turned back. Name it. I want it set up so that Lucas can't touch the principal until he's 30. I don't want him growing up thinking he doesn't have to work for anything. Nicholas smiled. That's exactly what I was thinking. You know him better than anyone, Melissa. Better than I do even now. I trust your judgment. The look of surprise on her face at his words was worth any concession. Thank you, she said simply. No, Nicholas replied. Thank you for giving me a second chance with our son. The night of the America's Rising Stars finale arrived with all the fanfare and excitement of a major television event. The studio was packed, the atmosphere electric. Nicholas, given his status as a guest judge earlier in the season, had been invited to watch from the front row. Backstage, Lucas was a bundle of nerves. Melissa was with him, helping him prepare, while Nicholas paced the lobby, checking his watch every few minutes. Nervous Whitmore. Nicholas turned to find Peter Morgan standing behind him, arms crossed over his chest. Like Melissa, Peter had dark hair and sharp features, but where Melissa's eyes were kind, Peter's held nothing but contempt. Peter, Nicholas said, forcing a polite tone. Good to see you. Wish I could say the same, Peter replied coolly. Quite the show you've been putting on these past few weeks. The devoted father, back from his self-imposed exile. Nicholas clenched, his jaw. It's not a show, Peter. I made a terrible mistake and I'm trying to make up for it. And you think a few weeks of showing up, of playing dad, makes up for 2 years of abandonment? For leaving my sister to deal with a cancer diagnosis? Alone? No, Nicholas said firmly. I don't think anything can make up for what I did. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying, Peter scoffed. Until it gets hard again. Until Lucas has a health scare, or until the novelty wears off. We all know how this ends, Whitmore. You'll break their hearts again. Nicholas stepped closer, his voice low but intense. You're wrong. I know you care about Melissa and Lucas more than you ever did. And I respect that. But I'm not going anywhere, not this time, not ever again. Before Peter could respond, a production assistant approached them. Mr. Whitmore, you're needed backstage. Lucas is asking for you. Nicholas gave Peter one last look before following the assistant. He found Lucas and Melissa in a small dressing room. Lucas in a smart little suit, his hair neatly combed. Dad, Lucas exclaimed. You're here. Of course I am, buddy, Nicholas said, kneeling to hug him. I wouldn't miss this for the world. I'm nervous, Lucas admitted. What if I forget the words to my new song? You won't, Nicholas assured him. But even if you did, it wouldn't matter. Just sing from your heart, like you always do. Lucas nodded solemnly. I wrote this song special. It's for both of you. Nicholas and Melissa exchanged a surprised look. For us? Melissa asked. Lucas nodded again. It's a surprise. You'll see. A stage manager appeared at the door. 5 minutes, Lucas. We need you in the wings. Lucas took a deep breath, suddenly looking much older than his 7 years. I'm ready. Nicholas and Melissa each hugged him, whispering words of encouragement. Then, with one last brave smile, Lucas followed the stage manager out. Nicholas turned to Melissa. He's going to be amazing. He always is, Melissa said softly. It's who he is. They made their way to their seats, Melissa in the front row, Nicholas back at the judges' table for this special finale episode. The show began with fanfare, introducing each of the finalists with dramatic video packages. When it was Lucas's turn, the video showed clips of his journey on the show, including the emotional moment when Nicholas had surprised him on stage. The audience cooed and awed at the touching family reunion. Finally, it was time for Lucas to perform. He walked out on stage, looking tiny under the bright lights, but his chin was up, his posture confident. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "for his final performance, Lucas Morgan will be singing an original song entitled My Family." Lucas approached the microphone, his eyes scanning the audience until he found Melissa, then shifting to find Nicholas at the judges' table. "This song is for my mom and dad," he said simply. "It's about how sometimes families can break, but they can also be fixed." The music began, a simple, hopeful melody, and then Lucas started to sing, his clear, pure voice filling the studio. "There was a time when the world fell apart, when shadows covered my heart. Mom held my hand through the darkest of days. Dad was so far away, but now the light is breaking through and I can see what's true. It's not about perfect, it's not about right. It's about love that lasts through the night." Nicholas felt tears welling up in his eyes as the chorus began. "We're a family broken but healing. We're a family learning to forgive. We're a family different but stronger, and that's how I want to live." Across the studio, he could see Melissa, wiping tears from her cheeks, her eyes locked on their son. The song continued, Lucas singing about hope and forgiveness, about the strength it takes to rebuild what's been broken. By the time he reached the final chorus, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. "We're a family, broken but healing. We're a family, learning to forgive. We're a family, different but stronger, and that's how I choose to live." The final note hung in the air for a moment before the audience erupted in applause and cheers. Lucas stood on stage, tears streaming down his face, but he was smiling. The smile of a child who had found his voice and used it to express his deepest hopes. The judges, including Nicholas, gave him a standing ovation. When it was Nicholas's turn to speak, he found he could barely form words through his emotion. "Lucas," he managed finally, "that was the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. Thank you, son. Thank you." Lucas beamed, his face alight with joy. The other judges added their praise, predicting great things for the young performer. The rest of the show passed in a blur for Nicholas. He offered comments to the other contestants, but his mind was still filled with Lucas's song, with the message of hope and forgiveness his son had offered. When it came time to announce the winner, Nicholas held his breath along with everyone else in the studio. The host built the tension, dragging out the moment as the three finalists, Lucas and two teenage singers, stood together on stage. And the winner of this season of America's Rising Stars is... The pause seemed to last an eternity. Lucas Morgan. The studio erupted. Lucas stood frozen in shock for a moment before jumping up and down with excitement. Confetti rained down as the host handed him a trophy almost as big as he was. Nicholas couldn't contain himself. He left the judges' table and rushed onto the stage, sweeping Lucas up into his arms. Melissa joined them a moment later, and the three of them stood together in a tight embrace as cameras captured the emotional family moment. "Hey, you did it, buddy," Nicholas said, his voice thick with pride. "You won." "We all won, Dad," Lucas said, still clutching his trophy, "just like in my song." Over Lucas's head, Nicholas's eyes met Melissa's. There was something there that he hadn't seen in a long time, a softness, a warmth, maybe even forgiveness. The celebration continued backstage with congratulations from the other contestants and producers. Lucas was going to be signed to a children's music label, with an album of original songs in the works. Through it all, Nicholas stayed by Lucas's side, soaking in every moment of his son's joy. This was what mattered. This was what he had almost lost forever. Later that night, after the excitement had died down and they had returned to Melissa's apartment, Lucas finally crashed, exhausted but happy. Nicholas carried him to bed, carefully removing his shoes and tucking him in without waking him. He stood for a moment, watching his son sleep, overwhelmed by love and gratitude for this second chance. When he returned to the living room, he found Melissa on the couch, still in her dress from the show, looking at the trophy Lucas had won. "He was incredible tonight," Nicholas said, sitting beside her. "He always is," Melissa replied. Then, after a pause, "Your lawyers called me today about the medical malpractice suit." "And?" They think we have a strong case. Better than Peter. Thought? Nicholas nodded. They're the best in the business. I told them to spare no expense. Thank you, Melissa said quietly. Not just for that. For being there for Lucas these past few weeks. For keeping your promises. I meant every word, Melissa. I'm not going anywhere. Melissa turned to look at him, really look at him, for what felt like the first time in years. That song tonight. Is that really how Lucas feels? That we're healing? That we're a family again? I think it's what he hopes for, Nicholas said carefully. And it's what I hope for too. Melissa was quiet for a long moment. I've been so angry with you, Nicholas, for so long, even before you left. We were falling apart even then, weren't we? Nicholas nodded. I was obsessed with work, with success. I didn't see what was really important until it was almost too late. And now? Now I know, Lucas, that's what matters. Everything else is just inner stuff. Melissa smiled slightly. That's quite a revelation from Nicholas Whitmore, business tycoon. It took nearly losing everything that really matters to see it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of their shared history between them, but also the possibility of something new. It's late, Melissa said finally. You should go. We've all had a big day. Nicholas stood reluctant to leave but respecting her boundaries. Of course. Will you tell Lucas I'll see him tomorrow? Maybe we could celebrate his big win properly. He'd like that, Melissa said, walking him to the door. She hesitated, then added, maybe we could all go out together. As a family. The word hung in the air between them, filled with meaning. I'd like that, Nicholas said softly. Very much. As he turned to leave, Melissa surprised him by reaching out and squeezing his hand briefly. Good night, Nicholas. Good night, Melissa. As he walked to his car, Nicholas felt lighter than he had in years. Lucas's song played in his mind. We're a family, broken but healing. Healing, it was a process, not an event. A journey they were just beginning, but for the first time in 2 years, Nicholas truly believed they might find their way back to each other. Not to what they had been before, that was gone, but to something new, something stronger. A family reborn from the ashes of his mistakes. 6 months had passed since Lucas's triumphant win on America's Rising Stars. Life had changed dramatically for the Morgan Whitmore family. Lucas's debut album of children's songs had been released to critical acclaim, and he had become something of a young celebrity, especially among families dealing with childhood cancer. His story of resilience and his message of hope had touched thousands of lives. Nicholas had kept every promise he'd made. He had restructured his entire life to prioritize Lucas, reducing his work hours and delegating more responsibilities to his executive team. The trust fund for Lucas had been established, exactly as he and Melissa had agreed. And he had been there for every doctor's appointment, every school event, every milestone in Lucas's recovery and growth. On a crisp autumn morning, Nicholas arrived at Melissa's apartment with coffee and pastries, a Saturday ritual that had developed. Over the past months, Lucas opened the door, still in his pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "Dad," he exclaimed, throwing his arms around Nicholas. "Guess what? I got an A on my science project." "That's fantastic, buddy," Nicholas said, hugging him back. "I knew all that hard work would pay off." Melissa appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Good morning," she said, with a smile that Nicholas still couldn't quite believe was for him. "Coffee is exactly what I need." Their relationship had evolved slowly, cautiously. The walls Melissa had built to protect herself and Lucas had come down gradually, brick by brick. They weren't back together romantically. Both agreed that would take time if it happened at all, but they had found a new way to be a family, united in their love for Lucas. "So," Nicholas said once they were settled at the kitchen table, Lucas happily munching on a chocolate croissant. "I have some news." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Good news or bad news?" "Good, I think. The lawyers called yesterday. Dr. Friedman has agreed to settle the malpractice case." Melissa's eyes widened. "Really? After all this time?" Nicholas nodded. "The evidence was too strong. His insurance company is paying out the maximum, $5 million, and the hospital has agreed to review all their pediatric oncology protocols. They're even naming a new early detection initiative after Lucas. The Lucas Morgan Protocol, Melissa said softly. That's wonderful. It means other children might be diagnosed sooner. That's the most important part, Nicholas agreed. But the settlement will also ensure that Lucas's future medical needs are fully covered, and there's enough left over for you to quit that job you hate and focus on your writing if you want to. Melissa had always dreamed of being a children's book author, but the demands of single motherhood and Lucas's illness had put that dream on hold indefinitely. I don't know what to say, she admitted. This is all happening so fast. Mom, Lucas exclaimed, chocolate smeared around his mouth. You could write books about kids like me, kids who got sick but got better. Melissa smiled at her son's enthusiasm. Maybe I could, honey. And Nicholas added, I have one more piece of news. I've been working on a project and I'd like your input, both of you. He pulled out his tablet and brought up a presentation with architectural renderings. What's this? Melissa asked, leaning closer. It's the Lucas Whitmore Children's Cancer Research and Treatment Center, Nicholas said, watching their reactions carefully. State-of-the-art facilities, the best doctors and researchers, and, most importantly, a place designed with children and families in mind. Private rooms big enough for parents to stay comfortably, playrooms on every floor, outdoor gardens, art and music therapy. Everything we wished we'd had when Lucas was in treatment. Lucas's eyes were wide as he looked at the colorful renderings. You're building a hospital for kids like me, Dad. I am, Nicholas confirmed, with a significant portion of my personal fortune and matching donations from corporate partners. But only if you approve, buddy. It's your name, after all. My name, Lucas repeated in awe. Lucas Whitmore, but I'm Lucas Morgan. Nicholas glanced at Melissa, suddenly realizing his mistake. In his mind, Lucas had always been a Whitmore, but legally, he carried Melissa's last name. I'm sorry, he said quickly. You're right, it should be the Lucas Morgan Center. I just thought, actually, Melissa interrupted. I've been meaning to talk to you both about this. She took a deep breath. Lucas, how would you feel about legally changing your last name to Whitmore, or maybe Morgan Whitmore? Lucas looked between his parents, his expression serious. Does that mean you and Dad are getting married again? Melissa blushed. No, honey, not right now anyway. But your father has proven that he's committed to being in your life. And you are a Whitmore as much as you're a Morgan. Morgan Whitmore, Lucas said, testing the sound. I like it. It sounds important. Nicholas felt a lump in his throat. It is important, buddy. It represents both sides of your family, both parts of who you are. Then that's what I want, Lucas decided. Lucas Morgan Whitmore. And the hospital can be called that too. Nicholas looked at Melissa, unable to express the gratitude he felt. This was more than he had dared to hope for. Thank you, he said simply. She nodded, her eyes soft. You've earned it, Nicholas. Every day for the past 6 months, you've proven that you're here to stay. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. That'll be Uncle Peter, Lucas said, jumping up. He's taking me to the Yankees game today, remember? Melissa nodded. I forgot that was today. Go get dressed, honey, while I let him in. Lucas dashed off to his room while Melissa went to answer the door. Nicholas stayed at the table, bracing himself. His relationship with Peter remained strained despite his consistent presence in Lucas's life. Peter, he heard Melissa greeting her brother. Come in. Nicholas is here. Of course he is, came Peter's dry response. They entered the kitchen together, Peter nodding curtly at Nicholas. Whitmore. Peter, Nicholas replied evenly. Lucas is excited about the game. He deserves some fun, Peter said. After everything he's been through. There was always an implied accusation in Peter's words. Everything he's been through because of you. But Nicholas had learned to let it go. Peter had been there for Lucas and Melissa when Nicholas hadn't. His protectiveness was understandable. Nicholas was just telling me about the settlement, Melissa said, attempting to keep the peace, and about the new children's cancer center he's founding. Peter raised an eyebrow. Is that so? It's going to be named after Lucas, Nicholas said. The Lucas Morgan Whitmore Children's Cancer Research and Treatment Center. Morgan Whitmore. Peter looked at his sister questioningly. "We're changing Lucas's last name," she explained. 2. Reflect both sides of his family. Peter's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Lucas came bounding back into the room, dressed in Yankees gear from head to toe. "Uncle Peter, I'm ready. Dad told us about the settlement and about the new hospital with my name on it." "Hospital?" Peter echoed. "Yeah, Dad's building a special hospital just for kids with cancer, and they're naming it after me. Isn't that cool?" The naked pride and excitement in Lucas's voice seemed to soften something in Peter's expression. For the first time, he looked at Nicholas with something other than suspicion or contempt. "That is cool, buddy," he agreed. "Very cool." "And Uncle Peter," Lucas continued, oblivious to the tension between the adults, "Dad got us tickets to the World Series if the Yankees make it. You can come too if you want." Peter glanced at Nicholas, who nodded in confirmation. "That's very generous," Peter said stiffly. "You're Lucas's family," Nicholas replied. "That makes you my family too, whether you like it or not." Something shifted in Peter's eyes, not quite acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of respect. "We should get going," he said to Lucas. "Don't want to miss the first pitch." Lucas hugged both his parents goodbye, then paused at the door. "When I get back, can we all have dinner together? The 4 of us?" The adults exchanged looks. It would be the first time they had all shared a meal together. "Sure, buddy," Nicholas said. "If that's what you want." "It is," Lucas confirmed seriously. "I want my whole family together." After Lucas and Peter left, Nicholas helped Melissa clean up the breakfast dishes, a comfortable silence between them. "He seems happier than I've ever seen him," Nicholas observed. "He is," Melissa agreed. "Having you back in his life, it's made all the difference." "And you?" Nicholas asked cautiously. "How are you feeling about everything?" Melissa dried her hands on a towel, considering the question. "Honestly, I never thought we'd be here. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine trusting you again, let alone considering changing Lucas's name, or—" She stopped abruptly. "Or what?" Nicholas prompted gently. Melissa looked at him directly. "Or thinking about us, what we might be to each other again." Nicholas's heart raced. They had been careful to keep their relationship focused on co-parenting, both afraid of risking the fragile peace they had established. "And what are you thinking?" he asked, hardly daring to breathe. "I'm thinking that people can change," she said slowly. "That mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to define a person forever. I'm thinking that the man I see now, the man who shows up every day for his son, who builds hospitals and fights for justice and puts family above business, that's the man I fell in love with all those years ago." Nicholas stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Melissa, I'm not saying I'm ready to jump back into a relationship," she clarified quickly, "but I'm open to the possibility of seeing where this goes. Slowly." "Slowly," Nicholas agreed, hope blooming in his chest. "We have all the time in the world." Later that evening, the 4 of them, Nicholas, Melissa, Lucas, and Peter, sat around a table at Lucas's favorite Italian restaurant. The atmosphere was tentatively cordial, with Lucas doing most of the talking, recounting every play from the Yankees game. And then Judge hit it right out of the park. It was amazing. "Uncle Peter caught me a foul ball, see?" he proudly displayed. The baseball, which already had a place of honor in his collection. "That's fantastic, buddy," Nicholas said. "Maybe we should get it signed next time." "Could we?" Lucas asked excitedly. "That would be so cool." The waiter arrived with their food, momentarily halting the conversation. As they began to eat, Peter surprised everyone by raising his water glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his expression serious. "To Lucas Morgan Whitmore, the bravest, strongest kid I know, and to new beginnings." His eyes met Nicholas's briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "To new beginnings," Nicholas echoed, raising his own glass. "To family," Melissa added. "To us," Lucas cheered, lifting his soda with enthusiasm. As they continued their meal, Nicholas found himself marveling at how much had changed in just 6 months. From the moment he had heard Lucas's song on television, that heart-wrenching plea from a son to an absent father, to this moment of family unity, the journey had been extraordinary. Peter was actually laughing at something Lucas had said, his usual guardedness softened by the joy of the moment. Melissa's hand had found Nicholas's under the table, their fingers intertwined in a gesture that felt both familiar and brand new. And Lucas, the heart of their unconventional family, was thriving. In the warmth of being surrounded by people who loved him unconditionally. "Dad," Lucas said suddenly, "when's the hospital going to be finished? Can I visit it while they're building it?" "The groundbreaking ceremony is next month," Nicholas told him. "And yes, I was hoping you would be there. In fact, I was hoping all of you would be there." He glanced around the table, including Peter in the invitation. "It's a family project, after all." "I wouldn't miss it," Melissa said warmly. Peter nodded. "I'll be there, for Lucas. And for the kids like me," Lucas added seriously. "The ones who are still sick." Nicholas felt a surge of pride at his sons. Compassion. Despite everything he had been through, Lucas's heart remained open and generous. "Exactly," Nicholas agreed. "For all the children who deserve the best care possible. And for the families who need support during the hardest time of their lives." They finished dinner and stepped out into the cool evening air. Lucas dashed ahead, pretending to be a baseball player rounding the bases on the sidewalk. Peter followed him, leaving Nicholas and Melissa walking together a few paces behind. "He's incredible," Nicholas said, watching Lucas's exuberant energy. "After everything, he's still so full of joy." "Children are resilient," Melissa replied. "More than we give them credit for. But they also need stability, security. They need to know they're loved no matter what." "I'm never going to let him doubt that again," Nicholas promised. "Or you." Melissa looked up at him, her expression open and vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen in years. "I know," she said simply. And in those two words, Nicholas heard forgiveness, acceptance, and the possibility of a love reborn. Lucas came running back to them. "Mom, Dad, look!" He pointed up at the night sky, where stars were beginning to appear between the city buildings. "The first star. We should make a wish." "What would you wish for, buddy?" Nicholas asked. "You've already got a hit album, a baseball signed by the Yankees, and a hospital named after you." Lucas thought for a moment, then smiled. "I'd wish for things to stay just like this, with all of us together." "That's a good wish," Melissa said, ruffling his hair. Peter joined them, hands in his pockets. "Ready to head home, champ? It's getting late." "Can Dad come over?" Lucas asked Melissa. "He could read me my bedtime story." Melissa hesitated only briefly. "Of course he can." The look that passed between them held a promise of more than just a bedtime story, of a future slowly unfolding day by day. Peter noticed the look and cleared his throat. "I should head out, early court date tomorrow." He bent down to hug Lucas. "Thanks for a great day, buddy." "Thanks for the foul ball, Uncle Peter." To everyone's surprise, Peter extended his hand to Nicholas. "Whitmore." Nicholas shook it firmly. "Morgan." A small nod, an acknowledgement. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was a beginning. As Peter walked away, Lucas took both his parents' hands, swinging between them as they headed toward home, a home that was beginning to feel like it belonged to all of them. "Dad," Lucas asked as they walked, "do you think other kids will sing my songs in the hospital? The ones about being brave even when you're scared?" "I'm sure they will," Nicholas assured him. "Your music helps people, Lucas. It helped me find my way back to you." "And to Mom?" Nicholas and Melissa exchanged a look over Lucas's head. "Yes," Nicholas said softly, "to both of you." 1 month later, the Morgan Whitmore family stood together on a stage at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Children's Cancer Center. Nicholas in a sharp suit, Melissa elegant in a blue dress, and Lucas, the guest of honor, in a miniature suit that matched his father's. Cameras flashed as Nicholas approached the microphone to address the crowd of donors, medical professionals, and families of cancer patients. "2 years ago," he began, "I made the biggest mistake of my life. I walked away from my family when they needed me most. I missed 2 years of my son's life, 2 years of struggle, of pain, but also of incredible courage and strength." He paused, emotion threatening to overcome him. "I thought I was protecting myself from pain. Instead, I was missing out on the most important lesson of my life, that true strength isn't about avoiding hardship, but about facing it head-on, together." He looked at Lucas, who smiled encouragingly. My son taught me that lesson through his music, through a song that broke my heart wide open. And in that breaking, I found my way back to what truly matters. Nicholas gestured to the architectural renderings displayed on stage. The Lucas Morgan Whitmore Children's Cancer Research and Treatment Center will be more than just a hospital. It will be a place of healing, not just for the body, but for the spirit. A place where families can stay together, draw strength from each other. A place where children like my son can find hope, even in the darkest moments. He beckoned Lucas to join him at the microphone. And now I'd like to introduce the heart and soul of this project, my son Lucas. Lucas stepped forward confidently, his eyes bright as he surveyed the crowd. "Hi," he said simply. "I'm Lucas Morgan Whitmore. When I was 5, I got really sick. The doctors said I had leukemia, which is a kind of cancer that gets in your blood. It was really scary and it hurt a lot. My mom stayed with me every day and every night. She never left me, not even once." His eyes found Melissa in the crowd, who wiped away a tear. "My dad," Lucas paused. "My dad was scared too, so scared that he went away for a while. But the important thing is that he came back. And now he's helping other kids who are sick like I was." Lucas looked up at Nicholas, who placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "The hospital we're building is going to help doctors find better ways to make kids better. And it's going to help families stay together, even when things are scary. Because that's what families do, they stick together no matter what." The crowd applauded as Lucas and Nicholas were joined by Melissa for the ceremonial turning of the first shovel of dirt. Together as a family, they broke ground on a project that would help countless families facing their own battles with childhood cancer. Afterward, as they mingled with guests at the reception, a woman approached them, holding the hand of a young girl with a colorful scarf wrapped around her hairless head. "Excuse me," the woman said hesitantly. "I'm Sarah Johnson, and this is my daughter Emily. She's undergoing treatment for leukemia at Memorial right now. She's a huge fan of your music, Lucas." Lucas's face lit up. "Hi, Emily. How old are you?" "6, the girl replied shyly. "I know. Hold the words to your songs. They make me feel brave when I'm scared about my treatments." "I was scared too," Lucas told her earnestly. "It's okay to be scared. But you're going to get better, just like I did." As the children chatted, Sarah turned to Nicholas and Melissa. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "What you're doing with this center, it will change lives. And Lucas's music, it's been a lifeline for Emily. For both of us, really." Melissa squeezed the woman's hand. "If there's anything we can do to help, please let us know." "Actually," Nicholas added, "we're setting up a foundation to help families with the non-medical costs of treatment. Travel, lodging, lost wages. Please take my card. Call me directly." The Johnson family moved on. Melissa looked at Nicholas with pride. "You're really committed to this, aren't you? To helping other families?" "I am," Nicholas confirmed, "but I couldn't do any of it without you and Lucas. You're my inspiration, my reason for everything." Later that evening, back at Melissa's apartment, which had gradually accumulated Nicholas's belongings over the past months, they sat together on the balcony. Lucas had fallen asleep earlier, exhausted from the excitement of the day. "He was amazing today," Nicholas said, "so poised, so compassionate." "He gets that from you, you know," Melissa replied. "Your ability to connect with people, to make them feel heard." Nicholas smiled. "He gets his strength from you, his resilience, his heart." Melissa leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "He gets the best of both of us." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. So much had changed in the past 8 months. From the moment Nicholas had heard Lucas's song on television to this quiet evening of shared contentment, the journey had been one of painful truths, hard-earned forgiveness, and rediscovered love. "I've been thinking," Melissa said finally, "about what you said at the ceremony today, about facing hardship together." "What about it?" She straightened up to look at him directly. I think I'm ready, Nicholas. Not to go back to what we were before. We're different people now, but to move forward together as a real family." Nicholas took her hands in his. "Are you sure? I don't want to rush you." I'm sure, she said firmly. Life is unpredictable. Lucas's illness taught me that. We don't know what tomorrow will bring, so we have to embrace the good we find today. Nicholas pulled her closer. And this is good? Us? Better than good, Melissa whispered. It's real, it's earned, it's ours. As their lips met in a kiss that felt both familiar and brand new, Nicholas thought of the long road that had led them here. The mistakes, the pain, the separation. But also the healing, the growth, the second chance he had never expected to receive, all because of a song. A song that had shattered his heart, and in doing so had shown him how to put it back together again, stronger, wiser, and filled with a love that would never again be taken for granted. Inside the apartment, Lucas slept peacefully, his dreams filled with music and family and hope. The boy who had lost his father and found him again, the child whose brave voice had helped heal not just his own broken family, but would go on to comfort countless other children facing their own battles. And, outside under a sky full of stars, Nicholas and Melissa began to write the next verse of their family's song. Together. The end.